year she was born, but she didn't live. She only lived about a day and passed away with heart issues. When I was 3 years old, my dad was ordained into the ministry. And by then, I had another brother and a little sister. And I'm not sure when in that time, mother couldn't find us little boys. So she went down, she looked everywhere, and then she went down in the spring house, and that's where she found us. And she said we were sitting there eating fishing worms. And I'm not sure why we did that. But after that, because of there was a road, a blacktop road between the house and the dairy barn, and she was afraid we would get out on the road. So she took a bed sheet, and she tied one end of it, one corner of it around our ankle, and the other end of it she tied to the dining room table. She tied me on one end, and she tied Andy on the other end, so we couldn't get in trouble. Anyway, and then it was only a couple years later that he was able to buy a farm, and he bought another farm, and we moved down there. And what I remember when we milked down there, that's when I was old enough to help carry the milk from the stable to the milk house. Daddy bought us little gallon buckets to carry milk and pour it into the strainer. And he was milking, I don't know, about a dozen cows at that time. I'm going to go back up a little bit, something else. One of my sisters, and it scared us boys so bad, there was a cold air return in the floor. I remember, I think it was in the dining room, and it was just like a register that had a screen tacked on the bottom of it, this square hole. And my sister Sarah, she was probably 1 or 1.5. That was there at the rented place. Somehow she got that register out. She decided to stand in here on this screen. And we just remember seeing her go down through the floor. And then we heard her holler and cry. So mother went down there real quick, and we went down, and here she was down there in a big old clay crock. And somehow she landed in there. Her bottom went in first, and she was wedged in so hard. I can still see my mother trying to get her out of that clay crock. The crock, I think, stood about that tall or something like that. There wasn't anything in it, but that's just for what it was worth. But I still remember the feeling seeing my sister go down through the floor. Yeah. Anyway, we moved to the other farm, and that was a dairy farm, and Daddy continued milking. We had a creek running between the house and the barn. They were quite far apart, the house and the barn were. And we had lots of playtime there in that little creek. It wasn't very deep. One time when Dad was gone, he was on a preaching assignment somewhere, I don't remember where, but one of my cousins stayed with us. And Daddy told me while they were gone, I'm supposed to take the axe and chop down all these old burdock plants. There was a bunch of big burdock plants, and they'd get a stem on them about that big. Well, I was there, and the other children were there too. And I had this axe, and he had just sharpened it before he left. And I'm not sure what Sarah was doing, but I was here with the axe to chop that thing down. And for some reason, when I was already going down with the axe, she stuck her foot out. And your mother and daddy were gone, and I chopped her right across the foot right there. And that thing stood wide open and bled. And what were we going to do? It was, another scary time for us children. But those things happen. I started going to school at that place, and we had a mile to the school bus. When I was in second grade, Daddy bought a bike so I could bike that mile. And first year, they would take us to the bus. The first year when I went to school, we always talked Pennsylvania Dutch at home. Well, I got to school, and they showed us all these different pictures, and we were supposed to say what they were. And, well, it was different things. And then there was a tree, and I called it a baum. B-A-U-M in German, baum. And the teacher thought I was associating something with a bomb. And that kept on. And at noon, she called my mother and said she had to come to school. They needed to have an interview. They wanted to know what kind of bomb I'm talking about. Because I didn't know what a tree was. I went to the public school for 4.5 years, and then there was a Wesleyan Methodist school started up, and Mother and Daddy took us out, and we went to that school, which was a Christian school, and very, very plain at the time. They didn't, or did they? Yeah, some of the ladies did. Some of the ladies did wear something on their head, but they all had their hair up in buns. And the girls all wore dresses, and they had to be modest dresses. They had a very strict code that people had to abide by. I'm going to have to jump through this faster. Anyway, that's where I learned to play ball. I bought one of the teacher's gloves. And then my 7th grade teacher, Mr. Burns, he was a left-handed man. He taught me how to play ping pong. And he could spin that ball. When he would hit it, that ball would go over there and jump right sideways. You'd miss it every time. And I tried to copy him. I never did do as good as he did. But anyway, it was some of the things there at Wesleyan Methodist School. I always loved spelling. Spelling, I could stay at the end of the line. Math, I was at the other end. And when I was older, I worked for a insurance man, and he said, David, there's one thing you got to learn. He said, you're going to have to stand on 2 feet with both eyes open and know your math. And so I learned math. I learned to do shortcuts in math, and it's helped me ever since. When I was 10 years old, my brother Andy and I, we would bale hay while Daddy milked. Andy would drive the tractor and the baler, pulling a wagon, and I would stack them. I could only get them about 3 high on the wagon. And that's the way we'd done our things. We had chickens, and Daddy sold eggs. We helped gather eggs, and that's where a rooster attacked me, and I hate roosters to this day. I'm still scared of them. I shouldn't say that, but that's the way it is. That was in Pennsylvania. Something else that really stood out to me It's something I didn't do. But when Daddy went to town, he would tell us to gather some fishing worms. And we'd take our poles and he'd drop us off about halfway between our place and town, about 5 miles from home. There was this, we'd call it a river here. It was actually bigger than the uncapography down here and quite a bit deeper. But he would take us and drop us off there. We were just little guys with our fishing poles, and we'd fish while he went to town. And those are times that we'll never forget. But yeah, it was always blessed me the time he took to take us places and allow us to do those things. In 1971, we moved to Tennessee. There was a church group starting there, and they wanted Daddy to be their bishop. And so we moved down there. We're actually the first family to move there. And it was, gas at that time was 25 cents a gallon. You could buy it all day long for 25 cents a gallon. Something my dad taught me in those years was to him, a work bee was about as important as going to church. If there was a work bee, we went. There had to be something bad wrong if we didn't go to a work bee. Or if someone was in need of help, off he'd send us. We'd take the tractor and we'd drive up to 10 miles to these people's house or place, to help them out for a day. And, those things have stuck. They really have. It was some good things that we learned there. And then in Tennessee there was lots of the families were starting up, and there was a lot of hay to haul. So we'd milk our cows early and take a quart jar full of milk and mix it with chocolate and drink a quart of chocolate milk and head to the neighbors. That's when we hauled hay that way together. Enjoyed that very much. And for Kyle, those years were kind of rough hoeing. And my daddy and Jonai Miller, which is Jay Miller here in town, that's got the mower like you've got, Walker mowers. It'd be his grandpa and his dad. His dad was my age. We went to school in the same grade. Anyway, they done concrete work together. We done that for a number of years, concrete, laid blocks, and done that to help out with other things. And then a couple of years later, we started taking down concrete stave silos. We take those stave silos down, haul them to whoever needed a silo, and put them back up again. That was a challenge. One pole down the middle of the silo and this spider thing up there, and we jacked it up with handyman jacks. And one time the handyman jack slipped, and talk about a scare. 3 feet isn't far, but you get up there about 40, 50 feet and fall 3 feet. Oh, that's a rough one. Okay, and I guess it was in 73 was when I got converted, and that fall went to instruction class and was baptized then. And then somewhere in there, and it may have been earlier than that, Martha's uncle Norman, he wanted to dig a basement under his house. There was only a crawl space. So he called Dad to see if he could get help dig this dirt out from under this house. Not with a skid loader either, it was a pick and shovel. And so I was the one elected, so I went over there, and he had an elevator stuck through one of the windows or the openings that he broke out. We shoveled dirt on there, and that was when the first time my wife impressed me. She wasn't my wife then. But she was up on the wagon shoveling all this dirt away from that elevator on piles on this flat hay wagon. And then when that wagon was full, we'd pull another one under it. And then after that, Norman and I would go shovel it off again and then come back for more. But anyway, yeah, that's the first time my wife caught my eye. And so in 1975 is when we first started dating. And that could be a long story. I won't get into that. Anyway, there's one thing that I will relate. One evening we were sitting out on the porch swing, and we were swinging and having our date. And of course, at that time, after the singing in church singing or the hymn singing at a home, then our dates would be from that time till midnight. Now, I'm not sure what time it was, but we were sitting out there on this swinging, and their old Norwegian elk hound evidently came over and laid under the swing, which that was all right. But all of a sudden, that hook wore through that he was swinging on. And this swing came right down on the dog. And the dog just howled and barked and carried on, and we just knew he was going to wake the rest of the house. And Martha was telling him to shut up. And I went over to him and said, what was his name, Joe? I'm not sure. Anyway, I talked real nice to him, and he quieted down pretty quick. But anyway, then I went out to their shop, and I found what I needed to fix this swing. I fixed it. The next day, her brother Alvin walks by there and says, and she was standing out there. Her brother Alvin walks by and said, I'd laugh if you guys were sitting on that swing some night and it would go down. Well, he didn't know it went down the night before. Yeah. Okay, we got, I guess I'll go there. We married on October 6th, 77. Lived in a little 10 by 40 mobile home that had 2-inch walls and like to froze that first winter. And then we only lived in there for, I don't know, what was it? A couple months. Anyway, and then I had a job offer at a row crop and beef farm to go in partnership with a Farm Bureau insurance man. And so that's what I did. And so we moved and went over there, and I'm gonna have to cut this off. Anyway, we lived there, and that's where Alan was born. Marie was born there, and Helen. I think that's all the children that were born there, weren't they? Was Judy born there? Okay, and then in 1985, there was a dairy farm came up through bankruptcy that was for sale, and we bought that. We went into the dairy business on our own. We dairied there from 85 till 92. In 92, we moved to Missouri and moved all our cows, all our farm equipment, everything we had. I made 21 trips with a Chevy 3/4 ton with a 6.2 diesel in it, not very powerful, and a 24-foot dual tandem trailer. That's how we moved from Paris to Golden City. And one time there was the DOTs I stopped to get fuel and found out DOTs were set up out ahead. And I knew I was way overweight for that little truck. And I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. So I took a back road. GPS showed me a back road. And I took it and I got back in there about 4 or 5 miles and wanted to bypass this DOT thing and come back out. And well, I didn't know there was this hill back there. But it was a steep hill, and I was one of those way over heavy loads. And the 6.2 was an automatic. I get about 3/4 of the way up that hill, and I powered out. It could not pull it. It just not enough power to go. So we stopped and sat there, and after a while, somebody else come by, and another 3/4 ton pickup, a local, and hooked to me with his Chevy 3/4 ton, and 2 trucks. We pulled the load up over the hill and got to go again. Some of that stuff you don't forget. Anyway. Yeah, well, we got to skip that. I've got about 14 pages here, and I'm only on the third one, so. Anyway, on that property in Paris that we had bought, this is just for the children, for the parents too. The school teachers at that time, they allowed the children to take turns to burn trash in school. And Alan was in the first grade, and he came home from school. This was so thrilling and exciting to him that he found some matches and decided to go out behind the hay barn, or next to the hay barn, and see if he could start a little fire. Well, that little fire wasn't little very long. He held his match up to the bale, and he thought he could knock it out again. Well, he did once, and he thought this was fun, so he tried it again, and a gust of wind came up. The barn was full of my hay for winter. That whole barn went in flame. I'm just saying this, children, just don't play with fire. It'll get away from you. It'll get away from you. Something else I was going to tell the children. When we lived in Cochranton, Pennsylvania, we were out in the garden down there at that place that Daddy bought. We were supposed to help Mom in the garden with she was planting something. I don't remember what she was planting. But I was out there, and the other children were too, and she told me, and I don't know why, I don't know all the details, I don't remember, but she told me to come to her. And I don't know why, but I took off and ran to the other end of the garden. And she called me one more time and told me to come. And I just stood down at the other end of the garden. Mother went ahead and planted garden. Pretty soon I helped the others plant garden too. And everything was good till we got to the house. And that's when it didn't turn out so well. So children, you always want to listen to your mother and daddy. Don't try to run away from them. It doesn't turn out too good. In January of '95, it was on a Tuesday, and there was church sewing that day. Martha didn't go, and she doesn't remember why she didn't go. But I was feeding cattle, and I went across the road. We had property on both sides of the road, and I had a bale of hay on the front of my skid steer, and it was muddy, it had thawed and it was muddy, and I was going to take this bale of hay back to the heifers, and the lane was so soft that I, I couldn't go anymore. I got out and I thought I'd go around a different way. There was an elm tree, probably not over this big around, but there was a limb about this high sticking out that side that was going to keep me from going around that tree. So I set my bale off and thought I'd take my skid steer and just bust that limb off. Well, an elm is pretty tough. I don't know how many people know about elm trees, but they're tough. You can just take that limb and just wrap it around. This limb was probably that big. You can just wrap it around the tree. Anyway, I was trying to break it off pretty close to the tree. And a skid loader, when you push up about this high, they want to tip back, go like that. Well, I put that limb between the big spike on top and the little spikes on the bottom. That pressure busted that little spike off. And by then, the skid loader, and I was sitting about like this, that little spike busted off and flung back into the cab. And I don't know, most of you see my head. It doesn't look very pretty. But it went into, made a big hole there. And I don't know how long I was out. But when I came to, I evidently turned the skid loader off because Martha heard me turn it off, or Alan did. And I was about a quarter mile from the house. He came down with a little John Deere Gator 6-wheeler to pick me up, to see what was going on, because I just sat there. And I started walking, and I met him out by the road. And he picked me up and took me to the house, and I had blood and stuff all over my face. So Martha called her brother, and they took me to the hospital. And at the hospital, they done x-rays, and they said, where my brain is, there's like a cavity in there. It's not full. Your brain is setting in a pocket of spinal fluid. Well, enough spinal fluid, it ruptured the lining on my brain. And enough spinal fluid had run out that cavity was emptying. And so I didn't know I was that stubborn, but Martha said they wanted to fly me to Joplin in a helicopter, and I wouldn't let them. So they took me by ambulance. Anyway, and I got down there, it wouldn't have done any good. I waited there between 4 and 5 hours till they had an opening to take me to surgery. And it was about a 5-hour surgery to fix all that. They cut all my forehead out, all that bone they cut out, across here to fix that. Anyway, and it was a long recovery. We found some pictures. We didn't find all the ones we wanted. Didn't have time to get them together. But anyway, I was in the hospital for 6 days. They let us come home early because we didn't have insurance. And when I got home, there was a new recliner there. And my 2 brother-in-laws bought that recliner and put it in there, and that's where I spent the next month. Part of 6 weeks, actually, was on that recliner. But the mercy of the Lord, I'm here. And I can still think, people probably don't think very good, but, you know, I made out so far. I'm jumping through a lot of this. Y'all have to just excuse me. In 96, we went to Paris to visit my parents and Martha's parents for a weekend. We left Monday morning to drive home. It was 8.5 hours. And we got home Monday night, And at 6 o'clock, on Tuesday morning, my dad had a stroke. There was so many things I would have liked to discuss with him. That was in 96, March of 96, Martha? Yeah, or heart attack. Anyway, that was March of 96. My accident was in December of 95. No? January 3rd of 95. Okay, that's right. Yeah, January 3rd. Lewis was in December. That's right. Anyway, in 97 is when I took over the Newport Township road maintenance. Took care of those roads there was 30 miles of dirt road I took care of for 19 and a half years. And after that, besides the dairy, we done that. The children were older, and I probably done more than I should, but we were doing that. In 2004, in May, Martha and I helped a family move to Bangor, California, Greg Avinas. Kyle would know who that is probably. Quite a few of the ones that came from back there. We took all their belongings to California. Then in December of 2004 is when Lewis got hurt. And I'm not going to go into that. When he gives his life story, he can say more about that. But I saw pictures of that, and that is, I don't know if any of y'all have ever experienced that, from almost killing one of your family. But I was backing up with the cattle trailer, and it was like the long corral gate was here, and here was a little gate, and we'd back up at an angle to this gate to where the trailer gate would swing over against the alley. Some of you can't see it. This is the gate. We'd back over at an angle against here. Well, Lewis, how old were you, Louis? 17. He was 17, and he was watching. It was after dark. I'd been to sale barn and bought some more cows, beef cows, and we were going to take them up there and unload them. It was cold, the wind was blowing, ground was frozen, and I was backing up at an angle. He was watching my tail light so I wouldn't bust it out on the trailer, on those pipes on the gate. But he didn't think about his head being like this, and this trailer's coming in at an angle up the top of the trailer. He was standing there watching his tail light. And that trailer, he had his head between the trailer and that. It was a homemade heavy gate, Schedule 40 pipe, 1.5-inch pipe, didn't give. And I thought I was against the manure pile or something, but the truck just spun. So I just let it roll forward a little bit, done it again. It's probably when I done the most damage. But he thought he was getting away then and didn't. It almost tore one of his ears off, crushed his head, pushed his eye out, and yeah, that was. I'm gonna relate this story, and I'm gonna have to quit. But on the way to the hospital, they flew him in a helicopter. We took him to town, to the hospital, and there they got him ready for the helicopter. And then Martha and I left. While they were taking him down, we had about 40 miles to Joplin, to St. John's. And I was in a hurry to get there. I was driving about 95 or 100, and people wouldn't get out of the way. I had my flashers on, I was blinking my lights. People would not get out of the way. And anyway, this one vehicle, and I don't remember all the details. Martha remembers a little different than I did. But there was a vehicle pulled around us. I had gone over in the slow lane to pass these vehicles that wouldn't move out of the fast lane. And I guess that's a challenge for us, is if there's somebody coming with flashers on and stuff like that, get out of their way. But anyway, this vehicle got in front of me, turned his flashers on, and anything that was in the way, he almost pushed them out of the way. He just cleared the path. This guy did. And I just followed him. We were still driving 95 to 100. But he cleared the way, made people move. And he went straight to that hospital, to that emergency room door. How did he know where we were going? And then we were inside, and then he came in, and he looked like he could be a druggie or something, like a low-class person. And he come in, and he said, I know you guys are going to need this. And he gave us how much the first time, Martha? $40 the first time, and then he left. Pretty soon he come back, and you thought he had 300. Oh, 60 that time. Second time, he said, I think you guys are going to need this. And then after a while, he came back again. We didn't even know this guy. Oh, Martha says there was two guys. Okay, anyway, was that the time they had 300? That time they had $300. And we were just kind of awestruck. And I'm not sure how long later they came back again and brought some more money. I'm not sure how much. It wasn't a lot. Was it 100? And said that was all they could come up with. But how God works. And yeah, and that we got there, and they told us they thought they lost Louis on the way down. They're trying to revive him now. And then you're up there in his ICU room, and they say that there's a lot of swelling in his head. And in 24 hours, if that swelling continues in 24 hours, he's going to have brain damage. And I was in that room when the doctor came in, and what is he going to say? But that's another miracle. That's another miracle. I could tell you more stories, but I'm going to quit. We've got other things to do tonight. So, Lord bless y'all.
My gracious Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for the many blessings that you bestowed upon us. Lord, thank you for your faithfulness, for your caring, and that you are really truly interested in what each one of the children, also what each one on this earth goes through. You have a plan, and that you have a purpose for our lives. Bless David for his openness and sharing tonight and this week.
Just going to say, Brother Mike Martin is here, and if any of you have any, if anyone has any questions or if you'd like to ask Mike about the camp resharing, mutual resharing, this is the brother, and you can get his information and talk to him, and also have his information with you too. But we're hoping maybe that a little bit of time to share with this. So, this is the brother to talk to.